Every financial advisor you have ever seen on television will tell you the same thing. Stop buying coffee. Stop eating out. Make a budget. Save 10% of your income. Invest in index funds. Start early. Be disciplined. Be patient. And over time, the mathematics of compound interest will make you wealthy. But that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is that this advice, which sounds completely reasonable when applied to someone earning $60,000 a year, is not just useless when applied to someone earning $18,000 a year. It is mathematically impossible to follow. And the people giving the advice know this. Because the mathematics of poverty are not the same as the mathematics of wealth. They are a completely different set of equations. And those equations have a name that economists use behind closed doors, but almost never say in public. The poverty trap. The crazy part is that when you actually run the numbers, when you sit down with a calculator and model the financial decisions facing someone living below the poverty line in America, you discover something that destroys every assumption you had about why poor people make the financial decisions they make. The decisions that look irrational from the outside. The payday loan at 400% interest. The rent-to-own television at 300% markup. The failure to open a savings account. The decision not to take the better-paying job across town. All of them turn out to be mathematically rational, given the constraints, given the options actually available, given the complete picture of costs and consequences that are invisible to anyone who has never been poor. And the craziest part of all, the mathematics that keeps poor people poor was not designed by accident. The poverty trap is not a bug in the American economic system. It is a feature, and the people who benefit from it have spent billions of dollars ensuring that it remains in place. By the end of this video, you are going to understand the actual mathematics of poverty in America. Not the moralizing, not the stereotypes, the numbers. And those numbers are going to change the way you think about every poor person you have ever judged for making what looked like a bad financial decision. This is the story of the poverty trap and the math that built it. Let us start with the most basic mathematical reality of poverty. The concept of fixed costs. Every human being on Earth has a set of expenses that do not change regardless of their income. Rent, food, transportation to work, utilities. These fixed costs represent a fundamentally different percentage of income depending on how much you earn. And this difference is not minor, it is catastrophic. Consider two people. Person A earns $60,000 a year, which is approximately $5,000 per month. Person B earns $18,000 a year, which is approximately $1,500 per month. Both of them live in the same American city. Both of them need a place to live. In that city, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,200 per month. For person A, rent represents 24% of monthly income. Uncomfortable, but manageable. They have $3,800 remaining after rent for all other expenses and savings. For person B, rent represents 80% of monthly income. They have $300 remaining after rent for food, transportation, utilities, clothing, healthcare, phone, and every other expense of human existence. There is no mathematical configuration of $300 per month that covers these costs. The budget does not balance. It cannot balance, not because person B is bad at math, but because the math does not work. This is the first and most fundamental aspect of the poverty trap. Fixed costs consume such a high percentage of low income that the margin for financial maneuver is essentially zero. There is no room for savings. There is no room for investment. There is no room for the kind of financial planning that well-meaning advisors recommend. The budget does not balance because it is mathematically impossible for it to balance. Now here is where it gets more interesting. Because the poverty trap is not just about having less money. It is about the fact that being poor makes everything more expensive. Economists call this the poverty premium, and it is one of the most important and least discussed aspects of inequality in America. Let us start with banking. If you have enough money to maintain the minimum balance required by a bank, you pay no fees for basic banking services. If you do not have enough money to maintain that minimum balance, you pay monthly fees. You pay overdraft fees. You pay fees to cash your paycheck if you cannot afford a bank account at all. The less money you have, the more you pay for the basic service of accessing your own money. A person who can maintain a $2,000 minimum balance in a checking account pays nothing for banking. A person who cannot maintain that balance and uses a check cashing service to access their paycheck pays between 2 and 5% of every check they cash. On an $18,000 annual income, that is between $360 and $900 per year in fees simply to access their own wages. The poverty premium on banking alone consumes between 2 and 5% of the total income of a poor person. Now, let us look at credit. If you have good credit, meaning you have had access to credit before and have managed it well, you borrow money at low interest rates. A car loan at 5%, a credit card at 15%, a mortgage at 7%. If you do not have good credit, which is almost guaranteed if you have been living below the poverty line because credit history requires access to credit to build, you borrow money at catastrophically higher rates. A payday loan, which is often the only credit option available to someone with no credit history and no collateral, charges an annual percentage rate of between 300 and 400%. This is not a mistake. It is not illegal. It is the actual cost of borrowing for someone who has nothing to put up as security and no credit history to demonstrate reliability. Now here is the mathematical trap. A person earning $1,500 per month has their car break down. The repair costs $400. They do not have $400 in savings because we have already established that the math of their budget does not allow for savings. Without the car, they cannot get to work. Without getting to work, they lose their job. Losing their job means losing their income entirely, which is a catastrophic outcome compared to paying $400 for a repair. So they take out a payday loan for $400. 2 weeks later, when the loan is due, they owe $460 because the typical fee is $15 per $100 borrowed for a 2-week period. If they can pay the full $460, they have paid $60 for 2 weeks of access to $400, which represents an annual interest rate of 391%. But here is the deeper trap. They cannot pay $460 because they could not afford $400 to begin with. So they roll the loan over, paying another $60 fee to extend it 2 more weeks, and then again, until they have paid several $100s in fees on a $400 loan that is still outstanding. Was taking the payday loan rational? Yes. The alternative was losing their job, which would have been financially catastrophic. Did they have better options? No. The payday loan was the only option available to them. Did they understand the math? Almost certainly yes, because people living in poverty develop extremely acute mathematical awareness of their financial situation as a survival skill. They took the loan anyway, because taking the loan and paying the extraordinary fees was better than the alternative. This is what the poverty trap looks like at the individual transaction level. Every option available is bad. The question is only which bad option is least catastrophic, and the mathematically correct answer is often the one that looks most irresponsible from the outside. Let us look at another example that is even more counterintuitive. The decision not to save. Almost every financial educator will tell you that the key to escaping poverty is to save money. Build an emergency fund, even a small one, even $50 a month. Over time, it will grow and provide the buffer that prevents the kind of crisis that leads to the payday loan. This advice sounds reasonable. It is also, for many poor Americans, mathematically destructive. Here is why. Many government assistance programs, including SNAP food assistance, Medicaid, and housing assistance, have asset limits. If you accumulate more than a certain amount in savings, typically between $2,000 and $3,000 depending on the program and the state, you lose eligibility for the assistance. In many cases, losing that assistance represents a far larger financial loss than the savings you accumulated. A family receiving Medicaid healthcare coverage is receiving a benefit worth several $1,000s annually. If they save $3,000 and lose Medicaid eligibility, they have traded $3,000 in savings for several $1,000s in annual healthcare costs. The rational financial decision is not to save, not because they are short-sighted or undisciplined, but because saving would make them worse off financially. This is one of the most perverse aspects of the American welfare system. It was designed with cliff effects, points at which small improvements in financial position trigger large losses of benefits, that make it mathematically rational to avoid improving your financial position. Economists have documented these cliff effects extensively. They represent a genuine poverty trap in the technical sense, a mathematical equilibrium from which it is rational not to escape. Let us look at the mathematics of the better job. Imagine our person earning $1,500 per month is offered a job paying $1,800 per month, an increase of $300. $300 more per month sounds like an improvement. Let us run the actual numbers. The new job is 15 miles further from home. Transportation costs increase by $150 per month between fuel and wear on the vehicle. The new job's hours overlap with the child care subsidy schedule, meaning they no longer qualify for subsidized child care and must pay full price, an additional $250 per month. The higher income means they no longer qualify for the SNAP food assistance they were receiving, losing $150 in monthly food benefits. The total cost of taking the better paying job is $500 per month. The total income increase is $300 per month. Taking the better paying job makes them $200 per month poorer. This is not a hypothetical. This is a documented phenomenon that economists call the benefits cliff or the welfare cliff. When low-income workers earn slightly more money, the combination of increased taxes, reduced benefits, and increased work-related costs frequently results in a net reduction in total financial resources. The rational decision, the mathematically correct decision, is to decline the promotion or the better job. The people who designed these systems are not unaware of cliff effects. They have been documented in academic literature for decades. The Congressional Budget Office has published analyses of cliff effects. State governments have commissioned studies of cliff effects. Think tanks across the political spectrum have documented cliff effects. The cliff effects remain because eliminating them would require either extending benefits to higher income levels, which has a political cost, or reducing the value of benefits at lower income levels, which has a human cost. Neither option is politically palatable, so the cliff effects persist. Now, let us talk about time. The mathematics of time availability is another dimension of the poverty trap that is almost never discussed in mainstream financial advice. Financial planning requires time. Comparison shopping requires time. Cooking food at home instead of buying convenience food requires time. Managing complex benefit program requirements requires time. Building skills through education requires time. A person working 2 minimum wage jobs to support a family has approximately 0 discretionary time. They cannot comparison shop because they have no time to research alternatives. They cannot cook at home because they have no time to cook. They cannot navigate complex benefit program paperwork because they have no time to navigate it. They cannot pursue education because they have no time to study. The time poverty experienced by low-income workers is not laziness. It is mathematics. There are 24 hours in a day. If 16 of them are consumed by work, commuting, and basic biological necessities, 8 hours remain for sleep. There is no time for the financial optimization that wealthy people take for granted as common sense. And here is the final element of the poverty trap mathematics that ties everything together. The cognitive load of poverty. Research by economist Sendil Mullainathan and psychologist Eldar Shafir, published in their book Scarcity, documents what they call the bandwidth tax of poverty. When your financial situation is constantly precarious, when you are constantly solving the problem of which bill to pay and which to defer, and how to make $1,500 cover $2,000 of expenses, the cognitive resources devoted to that problem are not available for other things. Their research shows that the cognitive load of financial scarcity reduces effective IQ by approximately 13 points. This is the equivalent of losing a full night of sleep. It is the equivalent of being mildly intoxicated. People who are poor are making financial decisions while cognitively impaired by the stress of poverty itself. Not because they are less intelligent, but because intelligence is a resource and poverty consumes it. The poverty trap is a system. It is a mathematical system with multiple reinforcing components, each of which makes escape from poverty more difficult, and each of which is individually justifiable, and each of which is maintained by policy choices that could be made differently. The banking fees that disproportionately burden poor people could be regulated. The payday lending rates that trap borrowers in debt spirals could be capped. The cliff effects that make it rational to decline better jobs could be redesigned. The asset limits that make it rational not to save could be eliminated. The time poverty that prevents financial optimization could be addressed through paid leave policies and childcare support. None of these things have been done at scale. Not because the solutions are unknown. They are well documented in economic literature. Not because the solutions are technically impossible. Other countries have implemented many of them successfully. But because the poverty trap generates revenue for the industries that profit from it, payday lenders generate billions in annual revenue from the trap. Banking fees generate billions more. Rent-to-own companies generate billions. The industries that profit from poverty have used that profit to protect the system that generates it. The math that keeps poor people poor is not a force of nature. It is a set of policy choices made by identifiable people in identifiable institutions for identifiable reasons. And every time a financial advisor tells a poor person to stop buying coffee without running the actual numbers of their actual budget, they are participating, however innocently, in the system that keeps the math in place. If you believe the public deserves to know where the money actually goes, subscribe. Every week, we cover the frauds, the scandals, and the financial crimes the system would rather you forget.